Hello everyone, Shinto Bean here, and we're looking at an image that recently popped up on Warhammer Combat Cards social media, along with the cryptic message, "Only ancestors recall the leagues of old. Something is coming." Now, clearly, we know what that something is if you've been following Warhammer 40k news. The funny thing is they actually, I guess, inadvertently previewed which faction would be released next over a year ago on April Fool's Day of 2021. On the developer blog, they actually did a post here. Let me just read through this because it's pretty funny. Developer update: Warhammer Combat Cards next faction. Since the launch of Warhammer Combat Cards back in 2019, the game has consisted of 8 factions spanning the vast majority of races found in Warhammer 40,000, from the dwindling Eldari and ravenous Tyranids to the barbaric Orcs and superhuman Adeptus Astartes. Well, we figured it was time to bring that number up to 9 playable factions, so we looked into what we could do to make this a reality. Firstly, we took a look at the cards and factions we currently have in the game. Was there a way we could split a faction up and create a completely new one? That seemed like a tall order. Instead, we decided to look at what exists in the Warhammer 40,000 range and draw our inspiration from something we haven't yet included. Imperial Knights could be a great faction, but first we would have to consider how powerful Lords of War would be against the cards that already exist. Then, out of nowhere, inspiration hit us like a guild trike. Introducing a sneak preview for the next faction for Warhammer Combat Cards. And then right below that was this image, along with the infamous phrase, "coming soon." So, what is this symbol referring to? I actually had no idea what this was, and I first got into Warhammer around the 3rd edition of 40k, I think it was. And I guess by this time, this faction had already been mostly phased out, so I had to do a little bit of reading up on what exactly happened. And it turns out there used to be space dwarves, and they were known as squats, and they were actually, there was a whole army of them, and this was just in like the very first editions of Warhammer 40k. But they were never as popular as the other factions, and they didn't sell as well, so Games Workshop basically decided to just scrap them. Until, over 20 years later, here we are in 2022, and all of a sudden they decided to bring them back. But they have been upgraded a little bit in the time that they were absent. As you can see, this is the little trike that they were referring to in the developer blog. And on the right is the new hoverbike it has transformed into. And they have been rebranded as the Leagues of Votann. And they have a full range of miniatures. They got some really powerful looking weapons and armor and vehicles. And I guess one of the issues with bringing them into Warhammer Combat Cards is, are there actually enough miniatures available for them to make a full-fledged faction? Because at this point there are over 500 cards in the game, and each faction has 5 or more warlords to choose from, as well as tons of bodyguard options. But I started playing Warhammer Combat Cards when it first started, and back in the day, things were a lot smaller scale. There were only maybe 2 warlords per faction, and some factions like the Necrons and Tau only had a handful of bodyguards. And of course, when anyone starts out in the game, even now, they start with just, again, a handful of cards, and they just have to slowly build their collection from there. So I don't think having a limited range of models would disqualify the Leagues of Votann from entering the game as a new faction. Adding a new faction has never been done up until now, and it'll be really exciting. I think the sooner they add these guys, the better, because for a while, Warhammer Combat Cards could be the only digital 40k game that has the Leagues of Votann playable. Because they're using the images of the models directly supplied by Games Workshop, it's very easy for them to make these into cards, and they can get them out much more quickly than to add a whole new faction into, one of the other 40k games in existence. So we don't have a specific date out for when they'll be released yet, but hopefully it will be in the very near future. Let me know what you think of the Leagues of Votann, and which of the models you're most excited about, and how you think they should introduce them into the game, because that's actually a big issue as well. I'm assuming some of the models will be locked behind a paywall initially, but you do have to have a certain number of cards in order to actually make a squad, a playable squad in the game. So how are they going to release those? Are they going to release them all at once, or just little by little? Let me know your thoughts on what they should do. But that's it for this one. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.